Welcome everyone to another observability clinic. We are back at the tips and tricks community sessions, and it's already episode number 18. Today's topic is Jenkins Pipeline Analytics with OpenTelemetry. And with me, I have Georg Blumenschein. Servus, Georg.
Servus. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Georg, just maybe a word or two. What do you do at Dynatrace?
I'm product owner. My team is called Delivery Tooling and Enablement. Describes very well what we are doing. And also, luckily, my title says product owner, but I still have some time in the company to really do the hands-on work as well, which I'm very happy about.
That's great. And I think that's also what we're going to see today. Can you maybe move forward and see what you have prepared for us?
Yes, I can. So thanks for the introduction. Let's jump right in. And let's jump with a little spoiler alert. So as you already can see, you will see a lot of charts and dashboards today. And we are going to ask ourselves some questions and hopefully answer that. And as you can see here, so we already have a failure rate. Why did we have a failure rate? How many do we have? I don't know. You do not know as well for now. Also, another one, why is this task so slow? You can see that this task is taking a lot of time compared to this task. So that's maybe interesting. And I'm not even going to start on that one. I mean, that's a huge outlier. That's an interesting thing. And that's probably worth having a look at.
Yeah, and I think this is what you are showing us, for folks, for those of you that don't know what this is. We are going to see and get OpenTelemetry traces or distributed traces from the execution of Jenkins pipelines, and then being able to analyze the characteristics and the specifics of individual job executions, whether they fail, they take long, parts are taking long. So typically things we do with applications when we try to figure out why are applications slow. And in this case, we're using the same technology, distributed traces, to analyze why pipelines are slow.
Exactly. And we are, of course, trying to do that by showing you real-life use cases. So we did not prepare anything special or something like that. It's really the day-to-day questions that come up that we are trying to answer. And yeah,
perfect.
I hope you will like it as much as I do.
I think we do, yeah.
The sad thing, before we can jump into the cool stuff, we have to do some terminology, but I promise it will be quick. As you can see here, this view, I guess some of you are already familiar with. This is the view that you get when you have a look at the trace in Dynatrace. A trace is all of this, so all the steps and spans that are beneath it are connected via the trace. If we would map that to Jenkins, a trace would be one build. So one PR build would cause one trace, same with one main build, that would also be one trace. Beneath it, we have the span. Same thing with the span. If we map it to a Jenkins, we have one step is one span. So the allocation of the agent would produce one span, and one Grail task would also produce one span. The duration of the span is called the response time in Dynatrace. That's simply historically grown that it's called the response time. But I guess we all know what we are talking about. And the same with throughput, also historically grown, it's the amount of traces. So if we map that again to Jenkins, it's the amount of builds that we have.
So also from this, again, folks, we've talked a lot about distributed trace analysis over the years, obviously. And really what I love about this, it shows us that we can use distributed traces to get an end-to-end view of everything that happens in the Jenkins world, in the job execution. But everything you show us today could also be applied to any other pipeline, assuming that this pipeline, GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps, there's so many different tools out there. If they can expose also OpenTelemetry data, traces, then we will be able to run the same analytics.
Exactly, yeah. As soon as you get the data into Dynatrace, it's same thing, only a little bit different. As promised, not a lot of terminology. So let's jump into the first topic, and that's the unified services. By now, they are GA, which is really cool. And they are simply the way of Dynatrace to visualize the OpenTelemetry data per service, which in our case would be one Jenkins instance. And first of all, how do you enable them? Luckily for us, that's really simple. You have one slider. You can find it under this URL, or you can go the easy route, simply scan the QR code and find the documentation. And as soon as you have them enabled, you can access your observability data under the well-known and hopefully beloved services screen, where you now will find the unified services as a service type. You can search for your service as with every other service, and then search for your Jenkins job. I have a little bit of a sneak peek already here, how this will look like in the demo. And also here, our well-known 3 dots, where we can say, show in Data Explorer, where we can then have a more detailed look on the data. But I will also show that in more detail in our demo later. But I wanted to have that in here so that you have something to look forward to.
Perfect.
And now that we have the overview with our unified services, we would also maybe want to have some more detailed view, which brings us to the second thing that I really would love to show you today. It's traces in Grail. And they are like really amazing. If you use logs with Grail, you already know this view, and you know that we are fetching logs here normally, but in this case, we are fetching spans. And it's really simply the spans you're getting from the OpenTelemetry data out of the box, no need to do anything. Then you can filter for a service name, in this case, our Jenkins, the Jenkins pipeline step, so filter for one span in this case, and then summarize it for the duration. Since OpenTelemetry gives us nanoseconds, we need a huge division here, but I guess that's fine. And suddenly we have, with a query that took us not even a minute to write, we have all the data with the agent allocation steps on the whole Jenkins instance. And I will also show you later in the demo why it is important to have this data, because it really tells us a lot and also helps in communication a lot.
Yeah. So, Georg, just for my understanding, what this really means is, as you are ingesting traces, in this case, Jenkins is creating OpenTelemetry traces for every job, will feed it into Dynatrace. Now, we saw the trace earlier. A trace is made out of individual spans, where a span represents a step in the pipeline. With this now, I can actually say, give me all of the agent allocate. This is a particular step in your pipelines.
Yes.
Give me an overview of how long this particular step took across all of the Jenkins executions.
Exactly, yes. And in this case, across all Jenkins executions, if you want one, of course, you can do it as well, but it's amazing that I have the possibility to do it across all. That's really cool.
And the reason why this is so important is I talk with a lot of users, and a lot of our users have many different, pipelines, and they share different steps across all pipelines. So with this, like the agent allocate, that's something that is probably used in many pipelines. So you want to know if this particular step is getting slower, is starting to fail, why it is slower, why it is failing, because then you can fix it for a broad variety of pipelines, right? That's really important.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yes, I think so as well. And make it even better, let's have a look at this in practice.
Yeah.
I will end the presentation. Close the tab because I have many of them open, so I do not get confused. So where do we start with all of this? In our case, we talked about it, Jenkins, we need a plugin. That's the OpenTelemetry plugin. I'm not going to guide you through the installation. That's really straightforward because it's like really out of the box. Install the plugin, you're ready to go. We can have a look at how it is configured a bit. So all you have to do in Jenkins is configure the endpoint. That can be directly your Dynatrace tenant where I can ingest the data. In our case, we have an OpenTelemetry collector because we split the data to 2 tenants, but for, I guess, 90% of the use cases, simply using your tenant. And the second thing that makes this already pretty nice is you can add an observability backend. Let's call it Dynatrace. Add this URL format in here. And we are basically done with the setup of the plugin.
So this, just for my understanding, this is a capability from that OpenTelemetry plugin that the Jenkins community is providing. And the visualization link here, I guess later on, they will just create a direct link for an individual job execution with the trace ID as a parameter. Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You basically spoiled my next tab.
I'm so sorry.
But I forgive you. So in here, you can see some Jenkins build, whatever, some execution, last one yesterday in the afternoon. And as spoiled by you, we have the OpenTelemetry link, and we can simply click on View the Pipeline with Dynatrace, and we will get the trace loaded. And this is the view that we've seen before. And that's also already the first thing that we can have a look at, because people are asking that. Here you can see it's a pretty fast build. It's around 30 seconds. You can also see the agent allocation step that we have here, only 8 seconds. That's pretty fast for spinning up a complete Jenkins worker. But what we have here is the checkout step. And for a build that's taking 30 seconds, more than half of it, the checkout step, that's interesting. Yeah. So that's something that you should have a look at, that you can have a look at. And I will also show you later how you can have a detailed look at that.
Could I ask you one more question?
Of course you
can.
Could
you go back to the Jenkins tab?
Yes.
And scroll up?
Yes.
So these are the individual stages on top, right?
Exactly.
Edit, configuration, deploy, blah, 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 blah. And then the same, if we go back to the distributed trace, we can now see the same thing here. Staged. Yeah, it's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So really the one-to-one mapping. Also, you can, of course, click it to get some more detailed view about this particular span.
Yeah.
So that's really nice.
Yeah. And then I have one more question. Sorry for that. But I see the declarative checkout SCM. So the source control, the actual checkout that going to Bitbucket in our case, this is something that the Jenkins or the OpenTelemetry plugin by default also gives us. That means any call to an external system, like a Git, like whatever it is, will show up here.
Everything you see here is coming out of the box from the OpenTelemetry plugin. For some very special use cases, we extended it, but I'm not going to show that to you today. I'm really going to show you the default things that you get out of this plugin.
Perfect. Thank you.
So we'll come back to those in a little bit. The next thing I want to show you, as promised before, the services view. And as you can see here, after enabling, we have the unified services. And then simply let's click on one of those services. I already prepared this view for you. So I will quickly go back so that you can see I'm not fluking or anything. I already prepared it with the correct time frame over the last 24 hours, simply so that we can get a bit more builds. And we already have one where we can see quite a lot of executions, some failures, a little bit of throughput. Let's have a more detailed look. As you saw already in the presentation, here we have the overviews with the response time, so the duration, the failure rates, and the throughputs, which is the amount of builds that we have. And what I usually do is I click on Show in Data Explorer, and we are here, have the data for, in this case, as you can see, we have the data for, oops, that was the wrong, this one, for the main build for the last 24 hours. And the reason I picked this one is because we had one real-life use case where people approached me and said something is wrong with their PR builds. They are not quite sure something. Sometimes they are taking a lot longer than usual. Sometimes they are just acting weird. They would expect after a commit to immediately get the PR build, but it's not like that. And they don't know why. And what I did is I adapted this query a bit. So if we change the equals to the contains, and for this PR, because as you know in Jenkins, are prefixed with PR. Now I hope this is working. Let's go to last 7 days to have some more complete picture. And we already see some interesting things. So we have some outliers. That's from the time, I mean, 1 to 4 minutes. That's not really concerning, but it's annoying a bit if they are normally 1 minute. But the way more interesting thing is they are all starting at the same time. And that was also the problem that they have. They had their hook from Bitbucket to Jenkins configured incorrectly. So Jenkins did not pick up the PR builds immediately, but only picked them up once someone clicked on the scan multi-branch pipeline. Then all builds were suddenly picked up at once, and that caused the weird behavior. And also interestingly there, I also asked around a bit during this time frame, someone noticed that it was not working properly and simply clicked on scan multi-branch pipeline manually every few minutes so that they get builds. And yeah, that's one thing the unified services provide for you. It's simply, you have the data, you can see it immediately, because if someone comes here and is like, it feels weird, but I can't really tell you why. So you can't really work with that. But with that, that's really nice.
Yeah. And for me, what's interesting here, so that means we are ingesting OpenTelemetry traces for every single Jenkins job run. We have all the metadata. We know what triggered it, what pipeline it is. And then you can easily now do your forensics, because you can say, I want to see a plotter chart like you have here. I want to see when these builds ran, when they happen. This is like perfect pattern detection, right? Like at the same time, you know something is fishy or something is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really nice. And what I also like to do is, if I know it's builds that really I myself maintain, I like to pin those views to a dashboard so that I have them easily available. And it's really like the first look I take since we have the unified services is on my dashboards with the unified services screens, because it's like at one glance, you immediately see what's wrong.
Yeah, and I think you can even take this a step further with Dynatrace. You can even set up alerts. You can say, hey, if something happens where within a minute, 50 Jenkins jobs all of a sudden run, you know something is wrong and you want to go and diagnose. Yeah, awesome.
So a lot of possibilities. Here my backup in case another query would fail. But the last thing that I wanted to show you, another real life example. We already talked a lot about the allocation times. And we did that because that's one of the main discussion points we have in the company, and one of the main discussion points that I have, because I, as maintainer of the Jenkins, of course, have a lot of discussions with the users of the Jenkins, because they, of course, often have different feelings than I do, because 2 minutes for them might feel different than they do for me. And a lot of the discussions we have is people telling me that it takes so long that until they get agents. And I'm like, I don't have that feeling. And they're like, but I have that feeling. But how do you know? Because it's simply a feeling and I can't work on gut feelings. And now with traces in Grail, as shown before, we can simply answer those questions. And that's like really the real-time use case, why I wrote those queries in the first place, fetching the spans on this Jenkins with the agent allocation time, and have a look at it. So for the last 2 hours, we are seeing like 24 seconds. So that's really nothing to worry about. Last 24 hours, we had one with 3 minutes. That's one of those where I would say that's completely fine, but where a developer would already say, oh, that's a bit too long. But if we have a look at it during the last 7 days, we have here one thing with 13 minutes where it's, 30 minutes, that's really long, especially if you think about that most builds are around 10 minutes and suddenly I take 13 minutes alone for the agent allocation. That's something where you really need to have a look at it. And now you have the discussion basis. Now you can really say, hey, this is something where we need to have a look at, and we did. And simply during this time frame, we ran out of cluster resources. And we went even further back. I will not showing you because then it already is loading quite long. But if you go further back, you see a pattern. This happens regularly, always at the same time, that at this point in time, we are running out of cluster resources. And what we did because of that is we are doing cloud bursting during those times. And now we resolve those things. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So to reiterate for those people that may not be familiar with this, when we talk here about agent allocation, it's about Jenkins tries to find the right Jenkins agent to actually do the build. And so they're reaching out, give me the agents that I need to actually run this pipeline. And as you said, right, 13.5 minutes is a long time to wait just to get a Jenkins agent to do the job. And especially if you find patterns again, at a particular time, maybe every week, every month, at the same time, something happens. And if you have the evidence now, you can solve this problem and therefore provide smooth agent allocations here. It's awesome.
Exactly. That's also the last thing I wanted to show you. Some final remarks that I have. So we've seen that from the beginning to the end, from the setup to the detail view, and please do not see them separately, but see them as one unit that you can use together. It tells you different things. The unified services give you more the overview. They are the first look. I showed you some problems that you can solve with that. And then when you know the overview and know where to look at, you can go into the traces and then have the exact look and everything. So that's really cool. You can perfectly use them in conjunction. Also, now you see here we have the agent allocate step. If you're unsure how a step is called, simply go back to this view. Here we have the step name. It's called declarative checkout SCM. Simply copy it and put it in here. No need for any magic or searching around, and we have the checkout times.
Yeah, it's perfect. No, it's it's really amazing. And can you go back to that distributed trace that you just had open?
Yes.
So the attributes, the Jenkins pipeline step ID, the name, the plugin, this is all attributes that the Jenkins OpenTelemetry plugin automatically adds to the distributed traces to the spans.
Exactly. Everything coming from the telemetry plugin, nothing configured by us.
Yeah. This is really cool. And folks, I know many of you are probably going to use Jenkins. For those that use GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps, whatever else is out there, chances are that these tools also have some type of OpenTelemetry support where they can create OpenTelemetry traces. You can then have it sent either directly to Dynatrace or to an OpenTelemetry collector and then to Dynatrace. For those where you don't have OpenTelemetry support, there are ways. We have a couple of other videos that I will link in this one to actually extend your pipelines and create OpenTelemetry traces out of your pipelines. So there's ways to do this as well. All the links we will add to the description of this video. Really nice.
Thanks. One small Easter egg I also hid in the presentation. Some of you might have noticed already, but I switched Jenkins a few times during the presentation because it's simply so easy. It doesn't matter which Jenkins it is. You can do it the same. I could simply switch the name in here and are good to go again. So that's really nice. And that's probably also the same if you do it with GitHub Actions or whatever.
And you could even then, as you said, you could just completely remove the filter for the service name and go across all the Jenkinses.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really nice. Awesome. Georg, thank you so much. Really great having you here and doing this, and especially because this is stuff that you do on a day-to-day basis. You're using OpenTelemetry observability to understand what's happening in the Jenkins builds. In the end, with the end result to optimize Jenkins so that our developers here have a better experience, a better developer experience.
I hope they see it as well, that I try my best for their experience.
Well, we should show them the video in case they didn't know what you do. That's pretty cool.
I will quickly kill my Zoom so that
Well, not
Screen sharing.
don't kill the whole, so we can just stop screen sharing. That's also,
I'm on Linux and have a nice bug there that I
Okay.
can't stop screen sharing.
all right. Well then,
So I will.
we should be able to go back to the room here. Should all be good. All right. With this,
Yes.
we say thank you and tschüss to everyone. We will be back with the next one.
Thanks a lot, Jutta. Thanks for having me. It was
Definitely.
really nice.
Yeah.
I hope nobody noticed how nervous I was.
No, I don't think so.
Amazing.
You're good. Awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.